Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about Btrfs and EXT4 and mainly which one do you need. Okay, so now in 2018 we can definitely say that both of these file systems are very prominent. EXT4 has been around for a hell of a long time. It's definitely the older of these two file systems, but with Synology bringing up more and more NASs that feature Btrfs, I think it is worth discussing these points about, ideally, why is Btrfs so good, which we have touched on in another video, so I'll keep it brief. And two, which one should you choose? Because there is still a choice. Even though Synology have started rolling out Btrfs on some of their more powerful Intel NASs, and QNAP haven't, there's still no denying that there is a choice between them, particularly for Synology users. For you QNAP users, ZFS is always an option at the top end, but that's for another video. But before we start talking about which one you should choose, let's talk about what the advantages are for both of them, because they've both got their own unique selling features, you know, their ISP. In terms of Btrfs, one of the biggest ones that everyone talks about non-stop is that data protection failure. It's got a huge support for snapshot, replication tools, and point of recovery services. It's got it built into Btrfs that it can monitor and check background data integrity all of the time with every single read-write. There's comparative points at either end. For those that have ever used ECC memory, those that should know that business users love ECC memory, because what it does is every time you do a read and a write, we'll talk about this in another video, every time you do a read and a write, there's a little bit of extra data lumped onto every line of bits and then checked against the other end. And if there's a problem, a repair takes place automatically. Sorry, short of breath. So the same thing is prevalent in Btrfs. Just extra little bits of data are checked at the point of write and the point of read and vice versa to double check the integrity of data during all file operations. Next, the data integrity protection itself. This is something that is conducted by Btrfs as a file system in its file management in the way that bits are handed back and forth, and therefore takes the load off of the CPU that has to handle that. Yes, you do need a good CPU to utilize the Btrfs file system. And for those that put it in the comments, I'm aware I said Btrfs, so in other words, file system at the end, and then the word file system again. Get over it. But that built in, even though you need a more powerful CPU to do it, it is great that the software, the file platform itself has it built into itself to check those read and writes, and therefore the CPU doesn't have to run any extensive snapshot and background checks itself to ease things up in the future. Next, the share quotas for each shared folder. With Btrfs, because of the way it handles files and folders and the way it's moved down an extra rung in the ladder across the architecture of the file system, you can create vastly more shared folders and vastly more individual shares within those folders because of the architecture of Btrfs. Do check out the link in the description that breaks that down for you a little bit more clearly. Now EXT4 has its own features too, although it lacks some of the more rigorous integrity checks of Btrfs. There's still no denying that EXT4 still has a lot going for it. For example, if you're going to be using any Linux platform, you're fine. EXT4 is the go-to Linux file system, and I know Synology NAS is a Linux platform, but if you're building your own NAS, people always choose EXT4 or ZFS for much bigger, more stable devices because of the legacy and the age of the file system, the amount of work that's gone into it, which makes Btrfs considerably newer and a lot more, not prone to failure, but definitely requires a lot more work being done on it to match EXT4 or ZFS. Also, the performance is higher in EXT4. It requires far less actual architecture hardware behind it to support it as a platform at the point of boot, and EXT4 does give you better performance overall. Yes, it doesn't have the background integrity checks, and those integrity checks, although that use less resources typically than EXT4, do result in a lower overall performance. Anyone that's ever used AES, any kind of encryption on their data will know that enabling encryption will always dip down your read and write performance compared with non-encrypted transmissions. The same can be said for Btrfs and EXT4. The great background snapshots, and as great as that, those integrity checks are, you will see a dip in read and write. Not massive, 20 megabits per second, maybe even 30, 40 if you enable the encryption, depending on the number of LAN and stuff like that. But still, nevertheless, EXT4 does have better performance overall because it doesn't have those extra factors built in. Now, carrying on, we can talk about the ideal user, who this is for, and should you use Btrfs or EXT4? Well, Btrfs is unsurprisingly, for people that want to have critical small data, and particularly data that's being handled constantly in a small subset to lots of individual users. If you have photo albums, if you have things where the quality of your product, large or small files, is very, very important. It's going for repetitious use, and you need to know if there's a problem in the background with something stored far, far away, then definitely Btrfs is for you. Next, general file sharing and low-level iSCSI LUNs, so targets, but effectively just storage targets, and stuff like virtualization, but on a smaller scale, Btrfs is great, because once again, this is when there's loads and loads and loads of small files where an error can be overlooked easily. And also recommended for home consumer users and light business users. I still don't recommend Btrfs as a business platform. Once again, to me, it's still too young, and also the background integrity checks can be handled by other things when you're using a NAS that is hugely powerful, I should say. Where the background integrity checks and snapshots can be done by the CPU and ECC memory, then you can forego the performance dip that you get in Btrfs. But if you're a home or small business user, definitely. I'm talking about your 918 and your 218 users. And also if you're using Docker Station applications, once again, these are ones where there's huge amounts of little files that, a Docker Station application is, traditionally much, much smaller than that of a standard big old ISO or image you would use for a traditional virtual machine. Docker applications, being much smaller, are actually comprised as a small file made up of loads of individual files inside in that zip. So again, Btrfs is great for that, where you need integrity checks on those tiny files throughout. EXT4, business. If you're using high-level virtualization, if you're running data centers, that sort of thing, I would not trust Btrfs. I would trust EXT4 or ZFS with its more extensive RAID configurations. Anything where you're running large-scale databases where data is being exchanged between servers as quickly as possible, they have other means to do those integrity checks on data where you don't have to lose the performance dip, or suffer the performance dip. And also if you're running packages of performance-orientated requirements, such as things where you have synchronized servers that are completely synced, so that if you need high availability, for example, EXT4 is much, much better for that, because EXT4 needs that speed. It needs devices to run as fast as possible together and not one pulling the other one down. In terms of RAID, I believe RAID is faster to build on Btrfs, but RAID is safer overall, as far as I'm concerned, in EXT4. Don't get me wrong, Btrfs is great, and you run a Btrfs file system next to Synology's SHR Synology Hybrid RAID, it's really, really good and great and stable. But once you start getting above 5, 8 bays, step away from Btrfs for now. It's still great, it's a great file system, but for high level business I will still trust EXT4 in the long run. And again, that goes for mail servers, file servers, business orientated products, EXT4 all the way. But thank you so much for watching. I hope this has helped you choose the right file system for you when you're setting up your NAS. Do let me know if there's anything else I can help with. If there's any videos for the future subjects you want to see covered, I will be covering EXT4 versus ZFS and ZFS versus Btrfs in the coming weeks. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, chuck me a like if you enjoyed this, and visit NAS Compares in the link in the description. Thanks for watching.